Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Money Thoughts, the financial educational program that helps you think about, better understand, and have more power over your money. I'm your host, Deborah Frazier. My co-host, Peter Crowley, is not here today. As many of you know, I'm a wealth management advisor with LRG Wealth Advisors at the firm of Hightower, and I provide investment advice and retirement, estate planning, and longevity planning to corporate executives, small business owners, and wealthy individuals. And that's one of the reasons I'm thrilled to have our special guest with us today, because we're going to discuss a topic about money that is very important, and that's the topic of debt. So, Reverend Soaries, good morning, and welcome to Money Thoughts.
Hello, Deborah Frazier. Thank you for having me. I'm always somewhat intimidated by the financial professionals like you because I learned about money by being broke. I'm not licensed in anything. So thank you for having me.
Reverend Soaries, you're a delight. There are just so many different ways I can introduce you. And even your name, you know, people recognize you as Dr. Soaries, Reverend Soaries, Pastor Soaries, DeForest Soaries, Buster Soaries. I introduced you one time years ago, and you said, and I said all of your names, and you said, well, one thing is clear to me, I have too many names.
Too many names.
But you're also known for so many accomplishments. And before I start asking you questions about our topic, let me just give you an opportunity to share with our guests a little about yourself. Where did you grow up? What's your educational background like? Things like that.
Well, I was born in Brooklyn, but I escaped at an early age. And my family moved to New Jersey, and so I went to public schools in New Jersey, Montclair, and have been in New Jersey basically all of my life. I went to college and graduated from Fordham University, and then I came to Princeton for my master's degree at Princeton Theological Seminary. I got my doctorate degree at the United Theological Seminary in Dayton, Ohio, the oldest Methodist school. So I'm a Baptist who went to a Catholic school, a Presbyterian school, and a Methodist school. So I'm either very smart or very confused.
I think of you as a Renaissance man, so that proves it. So even spiritually,
Well,
you know, you.
Well, I worked in civil rights, and of course, I've been a pastor. I was a pastor in Somerset for 30 years, 10 months, and 8 hours at the First Baptist Church of Lincoln Gardens. And I served during that time as Secretary of State under Christy Todd Whitman for 3 years, and excuse me, have been involved in teaching people a strategy towards financial freedom since 2005, which is what brings us here today.
Yes. So before we get to that, you're also currently the president and CEO of Corporate Community Connections. Can you tell us a little about Corporate Community Connections?
What I've learned through the years, Deborah, is that there are companies that really want to do impactful work in communities and neighborhoods. And there are community groups that are really struggling for resources and technical assistance. And I've been fortunate enough to be in both situations. I've been in the community. I'm on 3 corporate boards today, and I have access to a number of corporate leaders. And so Corporate Community Connections essentially helps corporations and communities connect in ways that benefit both. And since retiring from First Baptist, I've been able to spend much more time working on that. My largest client is Prudential, and I work very closely with Prudential, and I have numerous clients that can use some assistance in connecting with resources and opportunities.
One of the most impressive things I saw, Reverend Soaries, when I was a member of your church is the work you did in helping to redevelop New Brunswick, especially the work you did in bringing in, was it a Stop and Shop stores into the area, which was pretty much a food desert.
Right.
And the work you did in developing real estate and finding homes for low income. So individuals. Can you tell us just a little bit about how that work then has positioned you for what you're doing now and for the DFree movement, which we're going to discuss?
Sure. You know, the theme of my work that you just described is the word solutions. I spent a number of years coming out of the 60s as an activist, and I had to decide how I wanted to spend my life. Activism is great, but activism is designed to bring attention to problems. I didn't want to do that all of my life. I wanted to spend the bulk of my life not just bringing attention to problems, but solving problems. And so when I came to First Baptist in a very depressed neighborhood, disinvestment had occurred. As you referred, the food desert was real. What I decided was, rather than to protest the conditions, which might have made me more famous, to really create a strategy to change the conditions. And I think today, as we look at social activism and concerns, we have two choices. We can either lament the challenges that we have, or we can create solutions and partnerships that can produce those solutions. And so we decided that we would bring about revitalization in that area without gentrification and without displacement. And so over 25 years, we developed affordable housing, we created a plan, we redeveloped commercial real estate, we had entrepreneurship training, youth development, all with no displacement and no gentrification. So I'm very proud of that work, and the church is now a model for churches that would like to be beneficial not only to its members, but to the neighborhood surrounding the church. You know, most of our members did not live in that neighborhood, but we had a moral obligation to be of value to the neighborhood as a church that doesn't pay taxes, but we use municipal services. And so I think religious institutions have an obligation to be a resource and a solution for the communities that surround it and to address the social issues that we face.
Well, your church was instrumental in my decision to relocate from Westchester, New York to Central New Jersey, where I live now, but that's another story. We'll talk about that another day.
I remember you said that. I still need to probe deeply into that to find out what that really means, but I was honored to have you. I was always a person who assessed my work based on the quality of the people that it attracted. And so I was always inspired when thoughtful, rational, productive people came to church, because sometimes religion can get a little weird, but when you can get good, normal, intelligent, thinking people in church, it's a sign that the church makes sense. And I think religion should make sense, not just be so deep and spiritual that it's like spooky, but it should make practical sense for people of all ages.
Well, you've done a wonderful job with that, that's for sure. There are so many leaders in your church, it's amazing. But we're going to talk now about DFree. So what is DFree? And everyone's hearing this term, it's traveling all over the nation. What is DFree? What does it stand for?
Well, in summary, DFree it's a brand, it's a strategy, and it's a curriculum. But the word DFree is an acronym. It really stands for no debt, no delinquencies, and no deficits. And those were the three barriers in my personal life as I was living above my means, paying my bills late, using credit cards as though they were income. And I found myself living paycheck to paycheck. I never had enough money to save. I didn't have insurance. I mean, I was a community leader at a young age, but my financial life was in shambles. And when my grandmother died, I was 31 years old, and she left me a house that was debt-free. And she left my uncle a house that was debt-free. And she left my aunt a house that was debt-free. And she was a seamstress. I mean, she had a 6th grade education. She had 6 children and a husband who couldn't work because he had a stroke after their 6th child. And I thought to myself, however this woman created all of this wealth with meager means, no civil rights back in those days, no college degree, I decided at her grave that I was going to change my life. And the process that I used for the next 4 years is the process that I've turned into a curriculum and a program, and we implemented it at our church. And then we spread it to 5,000 other churches around the country.
5,000 churches?
5,000
Oh my
churches.
goodness. So how many individuals do you think that represents?
Oh,
Not
my
even thinking
goodness.
about extended families, but
We estimate at least 100,000 people have gone through our program.
oh, that's amazing. I didn't realize it was that large. I know it's at my church, and
Right.
I'm just going to hold up the book for a moment. So it's DFree, breaking free from financial slavery, but your book is a revised version, and it says, "Say yes to no debt."
That's right. 12 steps to financial freedom.
12 steps.
Again, because debt,
I'm just
in
going
the-
to show your workbook too, and you'll be able to come back
That's
and
right.
talk about it.
debt is the single most significant barrier to creating wealth. I mean, you know, you're a financial advisor. Your net worth is your assets over your liabilities.
Right.
So the larger your liabilities, the smaller
Your
your
assets.
net
Yeah,
worth.
Your net worth.
It's what you own versus what you owe. And what I was doing in my 20s was I was making $25,000 income. I had a credit card with a $5,000 spending limit. So I was living as though my income was $30,000. And in addition to cash flow challenges, the interest rates. So you're paying 18 and 24 cents on a dollar for the right to use a credit card that basically purchases things that you can't afford. And so the first part of our program, the first part of my book, focuses on the mentality, the drivers, what they call the triggers that cause us to spend money on things we can't afford, that causes us to have money in our accounts and still pay our bills late, and that causes us to live above our means. So we focus on three types of spending. Before we get to budgeting and investing and insurance, three types of spending. Type one, when we spend money, what we call compensatory spending, and that kind of spending is spending for significance. And so what I lack emotionally from a relationship or what experience I had during the day causes me to feel bad, I'll go shopping. You know, people say, let's go shopping to feel better. And
That's what people do.
and that's when you overspend because it's not rational. Then the second type is what the sociologists have called conspicuous consumption, conspicuous spending, where we're spending for status. And in the book I talk about an addiction I had to a particular logo that made me feel more important than the clothing without the logo. But if I have a Toyota income, but I have a BMW appetite, then the BMW feeds my emotional need for status when in fact it could cause me to have financial challenges. Then the third type of spending, my wife hates me to say this, but the third type in the book is confused spending, which is just stupid. I mean, we will spend more money than we should on things we don't need, and it just does not make sense. So when we get through level one, which we call getting started, how do you get started on the path to financial freedom? How can I prepare to talk to someone like you? Because you'll come along and talk about investments and other financial instruments, and in my head, I'll say, I can't afford it. When I can afford it, if I'm willing to stop spending $5 for one cup of coffee, if I'm willing to have basic cable instead of premium cable, even though I only watch 6 TV stations, right? So there are things that we do in excess. And before we talk about making more money or increasing our income, we've got to talk about how to use efficiently and effectively the money that we have.
So, Reverend Soaries, we're going to take a quick break. This is so interesting. You know, you're a great storyteller, and I love to hear your stories, and some of them on your DFree are just so much fun. So we'll be right back. We'll be right back on Money Thoughts. Welcome back to Money Thoughts. I'm your host, Deborah Frazier, and our special guest today is the Dr. Reverend DeForest B. Soaries Jr., and we are having a very engaging discussion, not only about debt, but about so many other things. And, you know, Reverend Soaries, one of the things that I've always enjoyed most about you, whether I was at church or listening to some of your podcasts or listening to some of your books, is you're a great storyteller. And you always tell stories that are relevant to stay with people and make them think. And one of the things that I really admire as I listen to your DFree book is how you unabashedly talk about things you didn't know, that you didn't know everything, that you spent money in an indiscriminate way. You acknowledged that you had just certain things that you felt were very important to you, so I'll tease you.
Addictions. Addictions.
You talked about how important nice ties were, and I noticed you don't even have on a tie today.
That's right. I'm a free man now. No more ties.
So use that as an example of how you were able to reach so many people when you tell a personal story,
right,
and get them to reflect and see how that's working in their own life.
Well, I think one of the challenges we have in the area of finance is that the information that's often disseminated to people is either so high and lofty and complicated that it's inaccessible, or in too many instances, it's kind of talking down to people and making them feel guilty or stupid. And so
even when they have money and even when they're very successful.
That's exactly right. We had a woman in our very first DFree class who was a member of our church. She owned 6 McDonald's restaurants.
Oh, wow.
She had 256 employees, and I couldn't figure out what she was doing there. And she said, listen, I'm making more money than I've ever made in my life, but I'm not sure I know what I'm doing with it. So it's not just about people who are down and out. Our relationship with money in a society that is so commercialized and so saturated with marketing messages and so driven by commercials, it's critical to have a perspective that fits your reality when it comes to money, because you can't do without money. Everybody needs some means of exchange, but to have a strategy is important. We don't talk about it much at home.
Right.
And we don't teach it at all in school,
right,
which means that we've got to meet people where they are. I have discovered that the best way to share with people the possibilities is to tell my own story. I mean, I tell other stories, but most of them are mine because I know my story best. And when you've lived the way I've lived as an intelligent community leader, I mean, I was a pastor of a church teaching people to give 10% of their income to church, and I couldn't do it myself because by the time I got paid, my money was gone.
So share that story, how you convinced people in your church to undergo DFree and what happened with the tithing. I think that's just such a great example.
Well, what's interesting is that the timing around our launch of this program had to do with the construction of our new church facility. We had tremendous contracting problems. We had legal problems. And so we were about $5 or $6 million over the debt that we had anticipated having. And so the cash flow was very, very tight. I mean, we weren't even paying every bill every month as an institution. And when I met with the board, one of the board members said, well, you need to talk more about tithing. In other words, if you told people to give more, then perhaps you wouldn't have these stresses. And my response essentially was this program, because there's a limit to how much people can give.
It's almost the same as if you borrow more, you could live a different lifestyle. It's almost the same thing.
It is, because it doesn't go to the root of the issue. And the root of the issue was that my members in 2005 were living the way I had been living in my 20s, driving nice cars, living in nice houses, wearing nice clothes, but no cash flow, no savings, no emergency fund, living paycheck to paycheck. We call that today the financially fragile. You know, a lot of middle income earners and upper middle income earners are financially fragile. They don't have money left over at the end of the month. And so, you know, I prayed about it, looked at my own life and said, listen, this is the solution. The solution is to help our people make wiser decisions and have greater knowledge about money. And in a year, the income of the church went up by $1 million without any special fundraising, because people were thinking now about Starbucks versus Dunkin' Donuts versus make it yourself.
Yeah, exactly.
And every little bit matters.
Yeah.
And when it comes time for insurance and other products that are financial, if you've spent all of your money on stuff, you have none of your money for investing. The average American is under-invested for retirement. And the reason I can afford to retire is because I changed my lifestyle.
Right.
And so financial prosperity is a lifestyle. It's not a miracle. It's not an event. It's a lifestyle. And that's what we teach. Now, the D's, the debt, delinquencies, and deficit, those are the bad D's. But we teach the good D's. The good D's are deposits in your own bank. Make deposits. Earn dividends on investments. That's where you come in. And have your name on a deed because you've invested in ownership. So the process assumes we can help people understand the bad D's, achieve the good D's, and not be dependent on any external source, but they can live off of their own resources.
So tell me a little about the people who deliver the program. Are they specially trained? Do you bring them in? Are they church members? So I'm asking, and I know one of the people that does your program quite well, but so I hear her share so much about it. But tell me, how do you select them, and what kind of things do they teach in the classes, and are the classes on a Saturday? Just tell us a little how the program works.
Well, the way we started was by training lay people meaning non-financial professionals, like me. I'm a non-financial professional, to use our content, to use our book and use our workbook, and we have a leader's guide. And we teach them the leader's guide, and then they teach people in their churches and their sororities and their community organizations. We now have an online academy, which is free, DFree online, and people can actually sign up. And I walk them through all of the content by video. So I'll do a video, they'll take notes, and it's kind of an individualized way to use the academy. Now, what's interesting is that we have many groups now who are using the videos and the online academy in their live settings. And so we try to adapt it, and we train people to use it in whatever way makes sense for them. We have sorority. The Delta Sigma Theta sorority is huge in DFree. The Zeta Phi Beta sorority.
Michelle Dutton is Delta, right?
That's right.
No.
She's a Delta
She's
all the way.
amazing.
We have over
amazing.
200 Delta chapters around the country use this for their members and for their community service. So it's a movement, and I say it's a brand because, Deborah, when we started the First Baptist, we did some what you would call focus groups, and what we discovered was people were very hesitant to admit they were in debt.
Right. I was wondering, how did you?
They were very hesitant to admit that they needed help.
Right.
They would not come to events which by attending, it was clear that they had problems.
Yes.
But we discovered that the same people were perfectly willing to say, I'm trying to be DFree. So DFree has a kind of ring to it. The focus is on the freedom and not on the debt or the delinquencies or deficits. And it's a brand, so we put it on T-shirts and hats, and we made it as cool as I guess you can make a financial program. Now, I have to be clear about this one thing. We never use the term financial literacy, because financial literacy assumes that you have mastered content and you can answer the questions correctly. I was financially literate when I was 25. I was just a financial fool. I wasn't illiterate. I was just insane. And so we focus on behavior change and changing perspectives and changing values. And that's why financial literacy is a part of it, but this is not exclusively financial literacy.
So we have only about 4 minutes left.
Okay.
Talk a little bit about the results that you've seen, how you know that this program is helping people, and can you just see if you can address the wealth gap for African Americans and people of color, and how DFree is helping to address the wealth gap.
Sure. We do pre and post testing where we ask people questions about their retirement savings, about their credit card usage, about emergency funds, about the use of alternative financial services, for instance. We'll ask people, have you ever used a payday loan, which, by the way, is a 390% interest product. And then at the end of the 12 weeks or the 12 steps, we ask the same questions. You know, do you have an emergency savings account now? Are you using payday loans? And so we can measure the change that has happened between the first and the last, right? So that's one. What we have not been able to do yet, which I'm hoping we can do at some point, is a longer term study so that we could come back a year later or 2 years later and get real data. Right now it's all anecdotal. We have online chats where people call in and give their little testimonies. But that's how we measure impact. And what we've discovered is that people are less likely to use credit cards in a way that requires paying interest. We're not against credit cards at all. I use credit cards every day, but I pay them off this week, so I don't pay interest. We're not against credit completely. We're interested in people using credit when it's a strategy to create wealth,
exactly,
as opposed to a strategy to fund a lifestyle you can't afford.
Right.
We want people to open accounts. If they have a savings account, open an investment account. If it's an investment account, open a 529. I mean, we're encouraging people to open an account that you did not have before.
Right.
And it's marvelous. Training lay people is good, one, because they have no products to sell. And we have to be very careful not turning over a group of innocent people to someone whose goal really is to sell them products personally. And we encourage people who are not financial professionals because they will essentially stick to the process. And normally they're involved in the process themselves. They're teaching and they're learning at the same time. The wealth gap is a serious issue that has roots in historical discrimination and historical injustice. We don't take policy decisions as a brand. You know, I'm not, from a policy perspective, I'm not working on reparations, nor am I working on increasing the minimum wage. What we're focusing on is helping people make decisions that in fact can either close the wealth gap for themselves or their children. The truth of the matter is, if you look at this objectively, for many people, the only way to close the wealth gap is to have sufficient insurance so that when they die, their children can upgrade their economic status. Now that's just a fact.
I would highly, highly recommend this book. You can buy it or you can get it on Audible. Because what you just started talking about just now, and I'm cutting you off because we only have a few more seconds left, but when you talk about life insurance and the impact it has on families when someone becomes deceased and it's left on the family to try to take care of burial and all the other things, this is such a great book, DFree. If an organization wants to start a DFree program, who should they contact?
DFree.com. That's easy. Just go to DFree.com, send us a message in the contact box, and our staff will get to you and help you do whatever it is you're trying to do to help other people be financially free.
This is Deborah Frazier. I'm signing off now from Money Thoughts. Reverend Soaries,
thank you.
Thank you so much for being a guest today.
Thank you, Miss Deborah Frazier. Always a pleasure.